The smell of fresh sourdough still clung to Myra Chin's cardigan as she hurried through the gleaming corridors of the Metropolitan Arts Center. Her best friend, Cassie Wells, had been talking about this audition for months. A chance to perform on Rising Stars, the television competition that launched careers overnight. Myra had only come along for moral support. Her flour-dusted apron hastily covered by an old jacket she'd grabbed from her car. "You didn't have to come all this way just for me," Cassie said. Adjusting her sequined top for the 100th time, her voice carried that familiar tremor it always got before big moments. "I know Saturdays are busy at the bakery." Myra smiled, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Mrs. Patterson can handle the afternoon rush. Besides, someone needs to remind you to breathe." She squeezed her friend's hand. "You've got this, Cass. Your voice is incredible." The backstage area buzzed with nervous energy. Contestants in elaborate costumes practiced vocal runs and adjusted makeup under harsh fluorescent lights. Myra felt distinctly out of place in her simple clothes and practical sneakers. But she found a quiet corner where she could watch the organized chaos unfold. That's when she noticed him. Devin Sterling, the show's newest celebrity judge, stalking through the backstage area with obvious irritation. His platinum hair was perfectly styled, his designer suit immaculate despite his agitated pacing. Behind him trailed a small camera crew, documenting his every move for the show's behind-the-scenes segments. "This is pathetic," Devin muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. 3 hours of auditions and not one person who can actually sing. Are we scraping the bottom of the barrel now? His sharp blue eyes scanned the room dismissively until they landed on Myra. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face as he approached her corner. The camera operator, a quiet young man with kind eyes, adjusted his equipment and followed. Myra felt her stomach drop as Devin's attention focused entirely on her. "You," Devin called out, his voice dripping with condescension. "Yes, you and thee. What is that? A work uniform?" He gestured at her modest appearance. "You look like you've never even seen a microphone, let alone used one. Why don't you show us all what real talent sounds like?" The bustling backstage area gradually fell silent as people turned to watch. Myra's cheeks burned with embarrassment as whispers and barely contained laughter rippled through the crowd. She could see Cassie pushing through the other contestants, her face flushed with anger on Myra's behalf. "I'm sorry. I think there's been a misunderstanding," Myra began quietly. "I'm not here to audition. I'm just—" "Oh, come on," Devin interrupted, clearly enjoying himself. The cameras were rolling now, capturing every moment. "Don't be shy. I'm sure you have hidden depths we've never seen before. What do you say, everyone? Should we give our little baker a chance to shine?" The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some laughed along with Devin's mockery, others looked uncomfortable with his cruelty. But the damage was done. All eyes were on Myra now, waiting to see if she would shrink away or take the bait. Behind the camera, Finn Ashworth frowned at Devin's behavior. He'd been working on the show for 2 years. He'd seen this pattern before. The star judge's need to create drama, to find someone to humiliate for the sake of ratings. But something about the quiet young woman in the corner made him hope she'd simply walk away instead. Myra took a deep breath and stood up slowly. The stage lights were blinding as Myra walked slowly across the polished floor, her worn sneakers squeaking softly against the wood. The theater held nearly 1,000 people, their faces barely visible beyond the glare. But she could feel their collective skepticism like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. Devin had followed her out, positioning himself at the judge's table with theatrical flair, clearly expecting this to be the entertainment highlight of his day. "Take your time," he called out mockingly, settling back in his chair. "We're all waiting to be amazed." Myra's hands trembled as she accepted the microphone from a stagehand. The metal felt cold and foreign in her palm. She'd sung plenty of times before humming while kneading dough at dawn, singing along to the radio during the bakery's quiet afternoon lulls, performing lullabies for her younger cousins. But never like this. Never with hundreds of strangers watching, waiting for her to fail. From the wings, she could see Cassie's worried face and Finn's camera trained on her, though something in his expression seemed different from the others, less predatory, more genuinely curious. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to block out the whispers and shuffling feet. The way Devon was already smirking in anticipation of her humiliation. Then she remembered her grandmother's voice. Warm and weathered, singing an old folk song while braiding Mira's hair on summer evenings. The melody had always felt like coming home, like being wrapped in love and safety. Without any musical backing, without fanfare or announcement, Mira began to sing. There's a willow by the water, where the wind learns how to cry, ... The first note emerged as barely more than a whisper, but it carried a quality that made the theater's restless energy pause. Her voice was untrained but pure, with a raw honesty that cut through the artificial atmosphere of the competition. As she found her footing with the familiar melody, her voice grew stronger, richer, filling the space with something the audience hadn't expected. And the stones along the shoreline, keep the secrets that we hide, ... The snickering stopped first. Then the shuffling feet fell still. One by one, conversations died away as Mira's voice rose and swelled, transforming the simple folk song into something transcendent. She kept her eyes closed, lost in the memory of her grandmother's kitchen. The smell of cinnamon and the feeling of being completely loved and accepted. Devon's smug expression began to falter. He sat forward slightly, his mouth opening in surprise as Mira's voice soared into the song's emotional climax. This wasn't what he'd expected at all. This wasn't a joke anymore, but the willow keeps on singing, though the seasons make her bend. And she'll teach us how to find our way back home again, ... Double quotes. Behind his camera, Finn felt goosebumps rise on his arms. He'd been recording performances for years, had heard dozens of technically perfect voices, but nothing had ever affected him like this. Through his lens, he could see how Myra's entire being seemed to channel something deeper than mere vocal ability, a connection to the song that made every note feel necessary, inevitable. The theater had fallen completely silent now. 1,000 people holding their breath as Mira's voice painted pictures in the air. Even the production crew, usually chattering and moving about, had stopped to listen. The song was simple, unadorned by vocal gymnastics or show-stopping runs, but it commanded attention through sheer emotional truth. As the final notes faded into the hushed space, Mira opened her eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, heavy with possibility. She blinked in the stage lights, suddenly aware again of where she was, of the hundreds of faces staring at her in stunned silence. Then it happened. A single person began to clap, slowly at first, then with gathering enthusiasm. Another joined in, then another, until the sound built into something thunderous and unstoppable. The entire audience rose to their feet as if pulled by invisible strings, their applause rolling over the stage in waves that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Devon sat frozen in his chair, his face pale with shock and what might have been shame. The woman he dragged on stage to humiliate had just delivered one of the most powerful performances in the show's history, using nothing but an old folk song and a voice that came straight from the heart. The roar of applause followed Mira off the stage, but all she could hear was the thundering of her own heartbeat. The moment the curtains closed behind her, she broke into a run, pushing through clusters of shocked contestants and crew members who parted like water before her. She needed airspace, somewhere to process what had just happened without 100 pairs of eyes watching her every reaction. She found herself in a narrow hallway lined with equipment cases, her back pressed against the cool concrete wall as she tried to catch her breath. The sounds of the theater felt distant here, muffled by thick walls and the gentle hum of ventilation systems. Her hands were still shaking. She couldn't tell if it was from adrenaline or terror. "Hey," the voice was soft, careful not to startle her. Finn appeared at the end of the hallway, his camera lowered and switched off. "You okay?" Mira looked up at him, this quiet stranger who'd been documenting her humiliation or triumph. His eyes were kind behind wire-rimmed glasses, and there was something calming about his presence. "I think so. I honestly don't know what just happened back there." "You happened," he said simply, leaning against the opposite wall. "I've been working this show for 2 years, and I've never seen anything like that. The way you made everyone stop and actually listen, ... Double quotes, he shook his head in wonder. That was real." Before Mira could respond, Cassie came rushing around the corner, her sequin top catching the fluorescent light. "Mira, there you are." She threw her arms around her friend, squeezing tight. "That was incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible." The whole theater went crazy, and Devin looked like he'd seen a ghost, and she paused, noticing Finn. "Oh, sorry. I'm Cassie. Mira's best friend, and officially the worst singer in our family now." "Finn," he replied with a gentle smile. "And I doubt that's true. Trust me, after what just happened, we're all amateurs," Cassie laughed. But her expression grew more serious as she turned back to Mira. "The producers want to talk to you. Like, immediately. There are already posts about your performance going up online, and people are calling it the performance of the season." Mira felt a wave of panic wash over her. "Online? But it just happened 5 minutes ago." "Live streaming clips," Finn explained apologetically. "The show encourages audience members to post highlights. Your performance is probably spreading across social media right now, as if summoned by their conversation." A production assistant appeared at the end of the hallway, slightly out of breath. "Miss Chen, the executive producers would like to speak with you. And there's been a situation with Mr. Sterling that needs to be addressed." They found Devin in his dressing room, staring at his reflection in the mirror with an expression Mira had never seen on his face before, genuine remorse mixed with. When she entered with Cassie and Finn, he stood immediately, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "A public one. What I did out there was cruel and unprofessional, and you turned it into something, ... double quotes. He struggled for words. "Something I'll probably never forget. I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've never heard anything like what you just did." Mira studied his face, looking for signs of the mockery that had been there earlier. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "Thank you. That means a lot. The thing is," Devin continued, "this is going to change everything for you. That performance is going to be everywhere by tomorrow morning. Record labels, agents, managers, they're all going to come calling. Are you ready for that?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Through the thin walls of the dressing room, they could hear the buzz of activity as the show continued, but Mira felt suspended outside of time, faced with a choice she'd never imagined having to make. Finn watched her carefully, noting the way she unconsciously stepped closer to the wall, as if seeking protection from the weight of possibility that Devin had just laid at her feet. He'd seen what fame could do to people, how it could transform and sometimes destroy them. Something told him that this quiet young woman with the extraordinary voice was about to face the biggest decision of her life. 3 weeks later, Myra's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Her performance had indeed gone viral, accumulating millions of views across various platforms and spawning countless reaction videos, covers, and tribute posts. The bakery where she worked had become an unexpected tourist destination, with fans making pilgrimages to see where the mystery folk singer spent her days. Marcus Reed, a sharp-suited executive from Meridian Records, sat across from her at the bakery's small corner table, his tablet displaying contracts and projected earnings that made Mira's head spin. "The numbers don't lie, Ms. Chen. We're talking about a 3-album deal with full creative support, professional songwriters, the best studios in Nashville. You could be performing at Madison Square Garden within 18 months, Mrs. Patterson." The bakery's elderly owner refilled their coffee cups with barely concealed disapproval. She'd been fielding calls from reporters and agents for weeks, and her patience was wearing thin. "More coffee for your friend?" she asked Mira pointedly, making it clear what she thought of the intrusion. "Thank you, Spee," Mira said softly, then turned back to Marcus. "I appreciate the offer, I really do. But this all feels so fast, so overwhelming. The music industry doesn't wait." Marcus replied, his tone growing more urgent. "Right now, you're the story everyone wants to hear. But attention spans are short. Strike while the iron is hot, or watch someone else take your place." Through the bakery's front window, Mira could see a small crowd of people with cameras, some holding signs with her name. The attention made her stomach knot with anxiety. She'd always found peace in the rhythm of baking, the quiet satisfaction of creating something beautiful and nourishing with her hands. The thought of trading that for a life in the spotlight felt like losing a piece of herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Finn. "Coffee break? I'm parked around back if you need an escape route." Mira excused herself, leaving Marcus with his contracts and projections, and slipped out through the bakery's rear exit. Finn was leaning against his modest Honda Civic, 2 cups of coffee from the shop down the street in his hands. "Rough morning?" he asked, offering her one of the cups. "Is it that obvious?" She accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the familiar aroma. "Everyone keeps telling me this is the opportunity of a lifetime, that I'd be crazy to pass it up. What does your gut tell you?" Mira considered the question, watching steam rise from her cup. "That I'm not ready for any of this. That maybe I don't want to be ready for it." She looked up at him. "Is that terrible? Am I throwing away something amazing because I'm scared? Or maybe you're protecting something that's already amazing," Finn suggested. "I've seen what the industry can do to people. The ones who make it often aren't the same people who started the journey." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the normal rhythms of the neighborhood continue. Around them, elderly residents walking their dogs, mothers pushing strollers, delivery trucks making their rounds. It felt real in a way that the gleaming record label offices and contract negotiations didn't. "I keep thinking about that night," Mira said eventually. "How singing that song felt like coming home to myself. All these people want to change me, improve me, make me more marketable. But what if that thing they want to package and sell is exactly what gets lost in the process?" Finn nodded, understanding flooding his expression. "The camera loves authenticity, but the industry often destroys it. There's something pure about what you did on that stage. Something that came from a place these executives have never been." Meanwhile, across town, Devin Sterling was dealing with his own consequences. The video of his public apology had been viewed almost as many times as Mira's performance. The comments were far less forgiving. His reputation as the sharp-tongued judge had been permanently altered by that moment of humiliation turned humility. "Your favorability ratings have dropped 12 points, his publicist informed him during their emergency meeting. "The narrative is that you're a bully who got put in your place by a baker from the suburbs." Devin stared out his penthouse window at the city below. "Maybe that's exactly what happened," he said quietly. "Maybe it's what needed to happen." The truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about Mira's performance, about the way she'd transformed his moment of cruelty into something transcendent. It had forced him to confront parts of himself he'd been avoiding for years, the person he'd become in pursuit of fame, the kindness he'd sacrificed for entertainment value. Back at the bakery, Mira made her decision. She returned to Marcus Reed with a polite but firm decline, watching his face cycle through surprise, frustration, and grudging respect. "You'll regret this," he said. Packing up his materials. "Maybe," Mira replied, tying her apron back on. "But I'll regret losing myself even more." 6 months after that fateful night, Mira found herself in Finn's converted garage studio. Surrounded by mismatched recording equipment and the warm glow of string lights they'd hung to make the space feel more welcoming. It wasn't Nashville, and it certainly wasn't Madison Square Garden, but it felt like home. "Try that verse again," Finn suggested from behind his modest mixing board, his headphones around his neck. "But this time, don't think about the microphone. Just sing it like you're telling me a story." Mira adjusted her guitar, vintage acoustic she'd bought from the local music shop, and nodded. Over the past few months, Finn had been teaching her basic recording techniques and encouraging her to write her own songs. What had started as a friendship born from shared experience had slowly deepened into something more precious, creative partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "There's a peace in morning silence, when the world's still fast asleep," she sang, her voice capturing the intimate quality that had made her famous. "And the dreams we thought were broken start to mend with daylight's keep." Double quotes through the small window of the garage. She could see the string of small venues where she'd been performing, the Riverside Caf, where she played Friday evening sets for locals and the occasional curious visitor, the community center, where she'd started leading a weekly singing circle for anyone who wanted to rediscover their voice. The Autumn Festival, where her performance had drawn the biggest crowd in the event's history. The knock on the studio door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Patterson peered in, carrying a plate of fresh scones and wearing the expression that meant she had news. "There's a young woman here to see you," she announced. "Says she drove 3 hours after seeing your video online. She's got a guitar and a story about wanting to sing but being afraid to try." Mira smiled, setting down her own guitar. This had become a regular occurrence. People making pilgrimages, not for autographs or selfies, but for something deeper. They came seeking the same authenticity that had made her performance so powerful, hoping to find their own voices in the process. In the bakery, she found a teenage girl clutching a battered guitar case, her eyes wide with nervous excitement. "Are you really her? The baker who sang on Rising Stars?" "I'm Mira," she replied simply. "And you are?" "Emma." "I'm 17, and I've been writing songs since I was 12, but I've never sung them for anyone. After I saw your performance, I thought maybe it's okay to not be perfect." Mira felt her heart swell with familiar emotion. "It's more than okay. It's the only way to be real." She gestured toward the garage studio. "Would you like to play me something?" As Emma nervously tuned her guitar, Mira caught sight of a familiar figure through the window. Devin Sterling, standing uncertainly on the sidewalk outside. He'd been trying to reach her for months, and she'd finally agreed to meet with him. She stepped outside, surprised by how different he looked without the sharp suits and perfect styling. He seemed younger, more vulnerable, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt. "I wasn't sure you'd actually see me," he admitted. "I almost didn't," Mira replied honestly. "What changed?" "I started volunteering at a youth center in the city," he said. "Teaching kids about music, about finding their voices. It turns out I'm better at building people up than tearing them down." "Who knew?" His smile was self-deprecating but genuine. "I wanted to thank you for showing me that." Inside the studio, I could hear Emma's tentative voice beginning to find its strength, singing a song about small towns and big dreams. Finn was encouraging her gently, the same way he'd encouraged Mira those first nervous weeks. "This is what you chose instead of fame," Devin observed, listening to the young girl's emerging confidence. "A garage studio and singing lessons for teenagers." "This is what chose me," Mira corrected. "The other path would have been someone else's dream. This one is mine." As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the converted garage, filling the space with golden light, Mira realized she'd found something more valuable than any recording contract, a life that felt authentically her own. She had her voice, her community, and someone who understood the difference between performing and simply being true to yourself. The story that had begun with humiliation and transformation had evolved into something simpler and more profound. A daily choice to remain connected to the part of herself that had always known how to sing, even when no one was listening. In the end, the woman who'd been handed a microphone as a joke had used it to find not just her voice, but her path home to herself.